Improving air travel for people with physical disabilities is the focus of a national summit taking place right now in Ottawa. It's the first of its kind, and it was convened after CBC News reported numerous cases where airlines have allegedly mistreated passengers with disabilities. Now, incidents which left some of them feeling dehumanized and humiliated, and sometimes with serious injuries. CBC's Alessia Stefanovich is following the developments and joins us now live. Olivia, Minister of Transport Pablo Rodriguez delivered his opening remarks just last hour, and he said he wants Canada to be a leader when it comes to air accessibility. Tell us about what's going to take place at the summit.
Well, Natasha, this is the start of a conversation about how to improve air travel for passengers with disabilities who say they are mistreated far too often. Now, as you say, this meeting comes after several news stories reported on by CBC News over the years about how passengers with disabilities have been mistreated, with their wheelchairs broken, passengers left on airplanes for hours because there's no one available to deplane them. And in the case of one man, he had to physically drag himself off the aircraft because no one was around to help. So these are the types of stories that have sparked this meeting today, Natasha. The federal ministers gave opening remarks, and then they went into a closed-door meeting with disability advocates, representatives from Canada's airlines and airports, including airport screeners, security screeners, to discuss solutions. And the federal ministers who are attending these meetings, they say that they recognize systemic change is needed. Take a listen.
There is no single solution to this issue. Whether it is policies, infrastructure, systems, training, we want to ensure that everyone here is applying an accessibility lens to every aspect of air travel. That way we can ensure that we're meeting the standards that passengers with disabilities need, deserve, and expect.
Now, Natasha, this meeting comes after a year after it was announced. It's a long time coming. Expectations are high. And as you mentioned, there is a big goal here to make Canada a world leader when it comes to air accessibility. The country is far from that now, but federal ministers say beginning talks like this is the first step to making Canada a world leader in this area.
So what kind of solutions are they looking at right now?
Well, disability advocates say what they're really looking for is accountability. Now, many Canadians may not realize this, but passengers with disabilities have to fill out lengthy forms and inform airlines before they even board a plane about their accessibility needs. And something appears to be getting lost after that information is sent to the airlines and the airports, and the onus is too often on the customers, the passengers themselves, to make complaints afterwards. So what advocates are calling for is for airlines and airports to step up and to be more proactive. But we've also heard from Transport Minister Pablo Rodriguez the fact that the federal government is considering serious consequences for airlines that don't make improvements, including the possibility of imposing penalties. Now, we've been speaking to some of the people who are attending this summit today about whether penalties is a good idea. Let's take a listen to why one person thinks it is time for penalties.
I think it's an important issue for study. I think maybe we are not there. It's not something, okay, I will do my best. No, I'm a client, I'm a customer. My diversity are using a wheelchair. That's the only point. So if I pay a ticket fly, I need the same services of the other passenger on board.
So penalties perhaps on the table, but what aviation experts also say that could be a useful solution is improving data collection. So basically having the federal government expose airlines for bad behavior, possibly creating a website that has all this information available where airlines have to report in real time all the incidents that happen every day with passengers for disabilities. Some experts say that will create behavioral change instead of imposing fines. But we will hear more details later today about what the federal government is planning. The federal ministers plan to make an announcement following the summit.
CBC's Alessia Stefanovich in Ottawa, thank you. Okay, folks, let's dig a little bit deeper and invite our next guest who has firsthand experience with this issue. Alessia Di Virgilio is a travel accessibility advocate, and she's joining us from Toronto. Alessia, thank you so much for making time for us today.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure because, you know, this is an important story. And I wonder, Alessia, if you can help the average Canadian who doesn't spend a lot of time thinking about this. What is the state of travel right now, specifically air travel, for people who have physical disabilities?
Thank you again. Thank you for having me. I think the state currently is a very precarious one. And there are challenges and barriers and threats to our safety at every step of the process when we're talking about a travel experience. And so I'm so thankful for the government and for all of the people involved in the summit that are getting together and really highlighting the issues, but I'm really hoping for change.
We'll get to what you're hoping for specifically in just a moment, but I want to remind our audience, Alessia, that you actually worked with our colleagues at CBC Marketplace and you went on a flight. They joined you through a hidden camera to just document what your specific experience was like. Tell us about that.
Hidden cameras rolling from Toronto to Charlottetown.
I think the whole experience was very reflective of what I would go through during any experience on a flight. And I think that there's a lot of experience, a lot of things that happened that weren't shown in the marketplace, but I think the most impactful for me was the challenges with transferring from my wheelchair onto the airplane chair, having people boarded before me so that during these transfers, people were watching and people were gawking, and just a lot of lack of flexibility from the airline staff.
We were just looking at video from that Marketplace episode, and I was really disturbed to see how many people were handling you physically. And I just wonder what that's like for you to experience. I mean, just imagine a bunch of strangers. I want people at home to imagine a bunch of strangers pulling you and grabbing you and shoving you around. You gave us a sense of how that makes you feel. Talk a little bit more about what that does to your sense of self.
I mean, I think that the current system says that people with disabilities and their devices are cargo, and that we are luggage, and that we should be traveled like luggage. And I think that that just speaks volume. I feel like luggage. I feel like not a person. I feel that I'm being forced to sit in a chair that's not meant for me, that could cause me harm. And that in the moment, there's very little action that I can do but to try and mitigate the risks that are coming towards me.
Describe the risks. What could happen to you?
So in terms of my body being injured, if you saw during the Marketplace episode, the lift fell on my head.
Oh.
In terms of being sitting for extended periods of time with little room to move or reposition, it could increase the chance of sores or pressures. Like you mentioned, having people touch me, people who were not trained, even though regulations state that they should be trained. And then on top of that, the potential risk to our wheelchairs, which then when we get to the destination, if we don't have our wheelchairs, could lead to more risk.
Let me ask you.
I would also like to add,
Please, go ahead.
my apologies that in order to travel, because washrooms are not accessible on planes,
Right.
and we can't travel transfer on planes as easily, that I had to dehydrate myself for days before and take medication to stop from going to the bathroom.
Alessia, listening to these details, it's so upsetting. I can't imagine anyone listening thinking, yeah, that sounds okay. Is it worth it to travel? Do you and other friends and colleagues who are in wheelchairs, do you end up limiting travel or saying no altogether because it's just not worth it?
It's always a battle, and I've said this before with the CBC that I love to travel, and for me, it's the difference between life and living. I want to live my life. I want to enjoy Canada and the world and go out there and meet people. But there is this element of risk that always kind of tries to keep you inside. But then I realize that that's what ableism is. And I don't want to live like that.
I absolutely hear you. So let's get back to what you were saying earlier, which is your concrete hopes to come out of this committee and the hearings today. What do you hope will change as a result?
Well, I hope that there's a sort of renowned commitment to improve accessibility for people with disabilities, with people with disabilities leading these conversations. I feel like when it comes to air travel and other areas about accessibility, we've been used as consultants, but we need to be leaders in these discussions as we have valuable experiential knowledge. I think that we need to, I'm hoping for a commitment that people with disabilities are not luggage and we're not cargo, and our devices, which are an extension of ourselves, are not cargo. We are human beings. I think that there needs to be data collection, as mentioned, harsher enforcements, and ultimately, my goal would be to be able to bring my wheelchair onto the plane and have it secured onto the plane. So yeah, these are lots of hopes.
Well, let's hope that they come true. Alessia Di Virgilio, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your experiences, and we'll keep this conversation going as it continues in Ottawa. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.